welcome back. So this is the third and final video installment in my How I Make My Passport Notebooks series. And in this video, we're actually going to sit down and make some notebooks with the tools that I showed you in the last video. So today I'm going to be making two notebooks. So I'm going to show you how I make a little composition book like this. And I'm also going to make a different variation on that. The cover material that I'm going to be using is this 210 GSM cream board. The paper that I'm going to be using is this dot grid paper that I harvested from a notebook. I'm going to use a red thread for the binding. And you can see here I've got my little printed out composition book cover. And then the second cover that I'm going to be doing, I'm just going to make it out of this leopard print gift wrap. So let's get started. Now, when I make a notebook, how I tend to do it is I'll make what I call a blank. So this is something that's very rough. It's stitched already, very rough. And then I will, once this has been bound, I will cut it down. Now I may cover this before I cut it down, or I may cover it after I've cut it down. It really depends. So I'm going to show you how I make these blanks. This is just with the grid paper I talked about in the previous video. And then I'm going to show you how I cover them. So for each notebook, we're going to need 16 pieces of paper. That's going to make 32 sheets and 64 pages. I'm just going to count those out now. All right, that's 16 sheets in each pile. Okay, so we're going to start folding them. Now you can see this has come out of a notebook, so it's got, you know, bits of string. It's all uneven on one side. So really when we're folding them, we want to be focusing on this being the straight edge and keeping everything together like that. Now, I'm not going to fold everything together and just one and done. That's not going to leave us with the best finish. So I'm going to take a couple of pages at a time. And I'm going to fold them. And this is where our bone folder comes in. Just to flatten out that edge. So you can see that's a super flat edge now. It's great. Now, I mentioned in the previous video that if you don't have a bone folder, you can use, say, I've got a spoon here. Use that. Another option is if you're going to be using something like this to cut down your notebooks at the end, you can also use that as a bone folder. You just really want something that you can help press down the edge. So press it down with your finger, and then I'm going to use this part of this. But I mean, you know, please, if you're going to do that, make sure the blade is away. But as I have one, I'm going to go back to using the bone folder. Now I'm going to put these bundles back together. That one is done for now. So the reason that we stitch these and then cut them, rather than cut them to size and then stitch them, is you can see once you put these together, the inner sheets start to migrate outwards, and so you end up with a very uneven finish. And what we want is to have a nice even finish like that. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and fold the rest of this paper for our second notebook. Okay, so we've got our two notebooks now. All right, now let's fold our covers. So I've got two pieces of the buff board. This one has a little mark on this side, so that will be the outside of the notebook. So we won't see it once it's covered. And that's our covers and our pages ready to go. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to punch the holes here. So I'm going to use this from We Are Memory Keepers. I've marked on here where a passport notebook starts and ends. So you can see it's up to this line here. How you use this is you screw this off. Make sure you've got a nice flat edge. And that's that one that we were talking about before. You can line it up. Now I've made a mark here to show where the center of this is. And you can see where the center is there. Once you've got that lined up, you just pop this over the top. Tighten the screws and that's held in place now. So I am going to start from the second hole here and I'm going to punch every hole up into that hole there. I will cut a little bit of this side off and then the majority of the paper that gets cut off when we trim down will be from this edge, the rough edge. All right, so I'm going to take my awl. This is a beautiful awl that I got from a bookbinding supply store. It's got replaceable points. If you were to purchase this from We Are Memory Keepers, it comes with this awl, which is, you know, perfectly usable. I just prefer the handle on this. I find it a bit more comfortable when I'm punching a lot of books at once. Take that out, you can see it's straight down the center. I'm going to take one of my covers, line that up like we did the paper, screw the guide back in and then punch these same holes that we just punched. Now I will say this is quite a narrow point on this awl. That's not an issue at all. You just got to bear in mind that obviously if you've got quite a fine hole, you're not going to be able to fit a chunky needle through it. So as I'm just going to be using an embroidery needle today, that's not going to be a problem. And you can see we now have the holes in the cover. So I'm going to line those up and they will line up perfectly. I'm going to take my embroidery floss. So you get 6 strands on embroidery floss. I'm going to use 3 of them. So as I'm making 2 notebooks, that's going to be perfect. The amount of thread you want is you start there, go to that hole, and I just do like 3 lengths. All right, so we're going to separate this out into our 2 lots of 3. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I mean, you can use 2. I find that using the 3 gives you a really nice thickness of the stitch on the spine. So I really like it. This is the beeswax I was telling you about in the previous video. So you just want to hold it on there and just run it down the thread, maybe 3 times. And you can see that that kind of brings that floss together in kind of one uniform piece, which makes it very easy to stitch with. The beeswax itself also helps the thread go through the paper a bit easier, and it smells really nice. That's like not important for this at all, but it does smell really nice. You can see here we've got our holes. I'm going to pick one of the center holes and go through that and pull that through till you've just got a bit there to hold with your thumb. You can go either way. I tend to kind of go up this way first. So we're just going to go in and out. All the way to the end. Once we get to the end, we're going to go back. So you can see got that space there. Just filling in the space with thread. Feel like you're starting to run out of thread, you're not, you're okay. Once we get to that middle point there where we're going to close that gap, I'm just going to hold that over this other side. Apologies if you can hear my neighbour bringing in their bin. Hopefully you can also hear the lovely bird song. And then we've got to the end, so we're going to come back to the center, and now it really feels like we're running out of thread, but I promise you we're not. And one last gap to close on the back there. And so we just have this one place in the middle, and we are just going to tie our thread, and we are going to tie it 3 times. So 1, 2, and 3. You can see we've actually got quite a bit of end there, and I'm just going to cut that off. And there we have it. We've done our first stitched binding, and it's very neat. So you can see here we've got on this cover little bumps where the card was punched. If this was going to be the cover just as is, and we weren't going to cover it with something else, and you were going to see the stitches, in that case I would punch the card and then fold it back on itself, so then this side would be the inside of the cover, if that makes sense. You can do things like just kind of buff the edge with your bone folder, and that will help flatten them down as well. You can see it started to help flatten them down, and that flattens down the stitches as well. You can see this is quite open, not really closing very well. I'm now going to take my bone folder and fold the entire notebook and just turn it backwards and forwards, applying pressure, pulling the bone folder across the paper. You can see that is much better now. So that's our first notebook. Now our second notebook, we're going to punch the holes a different way. You're going to just use this bit of covering material along the flat edge here. I'm just going to mark where my passport notebook starts and ends, like so. I'm going to take a ruler. I think I'm going to leave a space of maybe 1 square, and then we're going to start doing a hole every square. Like so. So this is where you're going to want to take your cutting mat, and you're going to want to take your pages. Going to place the edge and place this down the center. We've got the edge of this line against the straight edge of the paper. All of those markings there where we can use a drawing pin or a needle. I'm going to show you again with the awl how you would do this. So you just want to be lining up and poking through. You can put the holes in, like mark the holes like this. Obviously we're going to stop there because that's the end of our paper. And you can see now here we have those holes. So you can just go ahead and complete those holes, making sure that we're going through Let's see, we're coming out the other side. Now, an awl is a very inexpensive piece of equipment that you can use for all kinds of things. You know, even what might work is a compass. Basically just want something pointy that you can poke through a few pieces of paper. And there we go, we have our holes. I'm just going to do the same now with the cover. So choosing where we want our edge to be, lining that up, pushing it up against the center, and just using this as our guide. So I'm just going to complete that now. All through. This might seem like it's a lot more work than if you were to just use staples. This is a much nicer solution than stapling. Though, you know, if these are just going to be notebooks that you're just going to like jot in and then throw out and you're not really bothered about the longevity of them, go ahead. I'm just going to thread this needle. It's afternoon here, so the sun's kind of moving out across the sky and away from my window. So here we go, and I'm just going to go through and sew that exactly as we did our previous one. And you can see that this works just as well as the previous method. So if this is your first time trying to make a notebook, you know, don't feel like you have to just rush out and purchase all of the tools that I've mentioned here. Give it a go first, see if you like it. I do find this whole process very relaxing. Often I'll do this just while I'm watching TV or YouTube. There we go, our last stitch. I'm going to tie that off. 1, 2, 3. Snip. There we have it. So here we've got 2 of what I like to call notebook blanks. So this is the one that was done using the We Are Memory Keepers, and this is the one we did using the guide we made ourselves. Now we're going to cover them. I'm just going to use this as a bit of scrap paper. You can use a pencil if you like to just kind of mark out where your book kind of roughly will be. Just go past those lines a bit just to make sure that everything is completely stuck down. So I'll do that here. This is that lovely blue glue I was telling you about in my stationery favorites. It is fantastic glue. Like, it's very easy to apply. And it's permanent basically once it's dry. So think about it like that, and then just switch it around to our other side. I try to go up the edge here, but I try not to go too over the edge. Once we're pushing that cover down, the glue will spread, and we don't want it to spread to the point where it's going onto the pages. You don't have to use a spoon for this. You can literally just use your hands. And that's that one pretty much done. Now our next one, because we want to line up where we want our composition notebook to be, now we've got to bear in mind we are going to be putting on like a little spine covering. So I'm going to basically draw around this. I want to think about where I might want that to be. And I think we're probably about there. Just kind of pinch that edge so that I can fold that. And hopefully this will make more sense once I actually glue on the cover. I'm going to leave in the description a link to where you can find the download for this passport composition page. It's just printed out on A4 paper and you can print out your own. I'm going to trim off a bit of this excess paper here, just along this top edge, just so that when I am putting this in my guillotine, I can see where the edge of the notebook is supposed to be. And that's as much as I'm going to do. So we'll leave those to dry and then we will cut them down. And then the next thing will be to do the cloth on the spine. Okay, so I'm back. You can see I've put quite a big cutting board here. These have been drying for maybe half an hour now and they're ready to go. I've actually cut this one already on my paper trimmer. I do love having the paper trimmer. It makes it so much easier to just get through this with one cut. And then now I'm going to cut this one using the metal ruler and a blade. I've marked out on here where the lines will need to be for cutting, and I'm just going to do that now. Okay, so now I'm just going to cut. So we're just going to try and maintain even pressure and just go through a couple of pages at a time. Until we're all the way through. And there you can see a much nicer finished edge. Just going to repeat the same here. And I'm just going to mark out where this needs to be. Just making sure that this edge is straight against the edge of the notebook. And there we have our cut notebook. So these are both passport sized. You could just leave it at this and you'd be done. I'm going to clear away all this paper. So as you can see here, I do like to have this band. This is made with book cloth. So you can use a book cloth or you can actually just use a bit of black paper as well. So here I've got some pre-cut book cloth, so I'm going to use that just because I have it. I think I'm probably going to do a black on the leopard print as well, but you just want to have enough so that it can go evenly around both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and start sticking that on now. Again, I'm just going to use this glue. Now I have seen some people use gaffer tape or duct tape to create this effect on their notebooks. You can do that. However, again, gaffer tape is not archive friendly. The adhesive in the tape, I think it's highly acidic, so I personally would stay away from that. So I folded it so we can see where there is a center. I've popped our glue on. I'm just going to line this up with the center, like that, and push that round. Now we just want to move it up if we can. It doesn't matter if you have a bit of overhang at the top there, because we will cut that off. Now this is a really lovely book cloth that I'm using here. You can purchase pieces of it. It is quite affordable, especially when you think about how little you're using to do this. You can also make your own book cloth. That is something that I actually would like to try. So perhaps if I do that, I will make a video of that. This glue is going to dry pretty quickly. That one's almost ready. I'm going to do the same again for this one. So just fold it in half. So I'm going to just kind of pop that on into the center and then push it around like this. Now our first one should have dried enough that we can come in now and cut this off. I like to use my Penco scissors for this, just because they're quite pointy. And we're just going to use the notebook as a guide and just snip off the excess there. And again, holding our scissors against the notebook there and just cutting round. And then now this will be ready to trim. Line up next to the notebook. Trim that off. And there we have it. Now again, we could just leave that as is. However, I do always like to round the corners on my notebooks. I'm going to do one using my Kadomaru corner punch. And you just do this by doing a few pages at a time. So I'll just go through and do that now. Alright, so there you can see we've done all the corner punching on this one. Now that took a little while, so I am going to get my more heavy duty corner punch for this one. Here it is. And I'm just going to and it's done. So you can see it definitely saves a lot of time using this guy. Okay, so there we have it. We've made it to the end of this series. Hooray for us. And you've learned how I make my passport notebooks. We made these two. Now I would like to say that considering we used a mixture of very cheap, readily available tools and materials and more expensive specialized tools and materials, they look exactly the same. This is the one we punched with the guide that we made ourselves, and this is the one that we punched with the We Are Memory Keepers guide. they look the same. This one I cut using my paper cutter, and this one we cut using the knife and ruler. We use the cheap corner cutter to do the corners on this one, and then the more heavy duty corner cutter to do the corners on this one. What do you think? Do you think you'll give this a go yourself and make your own notebooks? I would love it if you did, and if you had any feedback for me, that'd be fantastic. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it through this entire video series, then well done, and thank you very much. If you'd like to see more content like this, then please, if you haven't already, maybe hit the subscribe button. And I said at the beginning, hopefully we would make something that didn't look like it had just been pulled from a bin, and I think we succeeded. I hope we succeeded. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.